What's up, everybody? Welcome back to my channel, Clemente Collector. And I don't know if you guys saw, but about a week ago, I did a deep dive with Greg from Midlife Sports Cards. And I love doing these deep dives because I always wonder some of these things. Being somebody who's like 3 years into the vintage hobby, not knowing as much as some of the guys who've been around. And the deep dive that I'm really curious about, do certain sets have more PSA 8s, 9s, and 10s than other sets? And maybe why is that? So what I wanted to do today is I wanted to focus on the 1960s because the 1960s are my favorite decade of Topps cards. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring a guest on right now. He has submitted a lot of cards to PSA, and we're going to look at the numbers together. Welcome, Dylan.
Yeah, Theo, thanks for having me on. Dude, I actually haven't sent a tons of PSA cards to PSA. I've probably sent 100 in tops, but yeah. I love this type of talk. I love talking about things like this because that's how my collection is going, is not gem rate, but centering. And my scale is different, but it'll be fun to see my centering scale versus the gem rate, which I don't think is going to have any correlation because I think gem rate or the sets that are hardest to find have nothing to do with centering. I think the centering is more in particular per the card itself within each set, but this will be fun to see regardless, to see if it does have correlation. And I also didn't know that 1960s was your favorite decade of cards, and I love that. It's awesome because that's not most people. So yeah, you always come up with fun ideas, Theo, so this is awesome.
Yeah, I appreciate you coming on. So Dylan has been grading his own cards for a long time, and to be honest, he grades very close to PSA. He's not doing PSA scale or anything like that, but he's very good at looking at cards and grading them and getting very close to what the grading companies are going to get. So this is really cool. Let me bring up the first slide here and kind of give you guys a background real quick. I talked about a little bit in the intro. So what we're going to look at is we're going to look at all 10 sets of the 60s, and I'm gonna look at mint percentage. So mint percentage is PSA 8, 9, or 10 divided by the total cards they graded. And then I'm also going to look at gem mint percentage, which is only PSA 10s divided by total cards graded. Dylan also, prior to this, gave me his centering rating for each set. So do you want to talk a little bit more about how you came to your scores for your centering rating per set, Dylan?
Yeah, that'd be great. To give a little feedback on this. First, the one stipulation that I wanted to point out is another reason I don't think the gem rate's going to match up perfectly, because PSA 8s to me are tons of them. Most of them are off center. They have something going on. It's not till you get to 9s and 10s that, like, the cards that appeal to my eyes start touching that base on a more common basis. Most 9s I can look at and be like, that's pretty nice. A lot of them have diamond cuts. Pretty much every 10 I pass as that is my style. But as far as the centering thing goes, yeah, we're gonna see my centering scale is just it's more on a per card basis. I'm finding as I'm going through and doing my database, I come to find that really all the 60s to me pretty much have the same centering thing. As I grade them as a 6 on a 1 through 10, how hard a card is to find centering, and a 1 being a card that comes out of a set today, 2023, and a 5 being the 1970s, like a 75 tops. I rank that in a 5. So the 60s, I started them all at 6s, and then within each set, I rank them individually. So it's hard for me to rank each one, but each year within the 60s. But I tried my best on far as how hard I think they are to find. And not only that, how hard they are for your eyes to adjust to how hard they are, if that makes any sense. Like, it's easy to see, like a 1968 card, you can get away with a lot further off center card, in my opinion, rather than a 69, because it's just blatantly stares at you in the face. And a 61, versus a 60, there's certain ones that really stand out. So anyways, this will be really fun just to see where this all stands.
One thing I'm curious about is a lot of collectors out there use the words condition sensitive set. This is a condition sensitive set. Well, these are all from the 60s. What's your definition of a condition sensitive set? What's your definition? What does that mean?
Well, that's easy. It's to me, it's the borders. Like 62 is to me going to be guaranteed. I almost could stamp that guaranteed going to be the hardest gem rate to find because of the wood borders. Although 68 has like a wood border to it, but it's not the same. And it's later in the 60s. More people a little more condition sensitive in that era of collecting. But that's my guess. And so we're going to see as we go along. I won't give out my rankings right now, but that's how I see it. You got a lot of color on the border. It's going to be harder to gem rate, 71 tops, so on and so forth. Simple, super simple.
So devil's advocate, if a PSA grader is looking at every card through a loop, obviously a wood grain or a dark border like 71 tops, which we won't be looking at today, if from the eye, you don't even need to look at a loop. But when you look at a white border through a loop, does stuff still get unnoticed even through a loop with a white border? Is that what you're saying?
Well, it does, and I think that I honestly don't know how deep they are looking through a loop at PSA on every single card they see. I definitely think that, I mean, when you look through a loop and you look at a corner on any card, even a 7, they look like they've been chewed up by a rat. Like they look really bad. And definitely stands out a lot more on the other cards, the color borders, the 62s, 71s, and so forth. I think that's what we're going to see in the gem rate. And like, I have never looked at the gem rate website ever once in my life. I never looked on PSA pop reports. So this will be fun. I've looked at pop reports, but I've never gone what's the hardest set? To me, it's just kind of obvious, but maybe I'll be completely wrong here with which ones are condition sensitive.
And if I told you that the number 10 is like high 40s, 40 percentages as far as gem, as far as mint percentage, and the number 1 is like 25%. Like we have a 20% gap from 10 to 1. Is that surprising to you or not surprising?
No, I could see it being a much wider gap than that. I could see a 62, being 50% different than, my easiest one, the 69 to rank on that.
All right. Well, we're going to go through the bottom 5 quicker than the top 5. So we're going to start with the one that's easiest to be a high mint percentage. And what's your guess for the number 10?
This is the easiest one, 1969.
1969. Okay. 1968. So mint percentage, 55%. Gem mint percentage, 2.4%. And Dylan centering, you had it at 9. So 9 means it's easy to get centered cards. 1 would be hard to get centered cards. So where did you have 68 on your list?
I have that next. So no, not.
Okay.
Yeah, pretty good.
For some reason, it looks like my font's going to get messed up on my Mickey Mantles. So I will read it off my PowerPoint here. So Mickey Mantle, PSA 8, 1,554. PSA 9, 233. PSA 10, there's 11 of them. So does any of that surprise you with the 1968 set?
Not whatsoever. They're easy to find, easy to get. No, doesn't surprise me.
Okay. All right, let's move on. Your next one, you said you had 68, okay? Right? Yep. Okay. Yep. 1969. Boom. So mint percentage, 52%. Gem mint percentage, 0.96. Dylan centering, 7. So pretty easy to find centered, you thought?
I mean, they're not easy to. That's the problem. They're not easy to. None of these are easy to find centered. Even 68. But yes, because you can really see the off-centeredness in 69s more than the 68s because of the white borders. But they're doable. I have a decent amount. You just have to be patient.
Okay, and since you can't read the mantle data, a PSA 8, there's 983. PSA 9, 126. PSA 10, there's only 3 of them. So, and that's counting both variations. So
okay, yeah, I can read that. We can see that.
Oh,
I guess you can't really see the PSA, I guess, but
yeah, on my screen it's showing that it's too big for you to read it all.
Oh, okay. I see it.
Interesting. Okay, let's move on then. Number 8, 1967. What did you have for number 8?
Number 8, I had 64, and
Where did you?
67, I had number 7.
Okay. All right, mint percentage. If you grade a 67, they've graded over half of them as 8 or better. That's pretty shocking to me, to be honest with you, as a collector. I didn't think there would be that many. Gem mint percentage 0.74%, and Dylan centering. You said this is a pretty hard set to find centered.
Very hard. It's extremely hard to find a good centered 67. And PSA 8s are pretty much all of them are off centered. 9s, diamond cuts. You really, I mean, I don't even think I have a perfectly centered copy of a 67 Topps card. It's super, super hard to find. But I haven't gone like hunting for them either. I just come across one, and then that's how I have one Mantle, and it's not perfect, and I thought it was when I got it. So it's tough.
So as far as Mantle goes, PSA 8s 1,083, PSA 9s they've only graded 114, PSA 10s they've only graded 2 of them. So extremely rare PSA 10 card. All right, next up, number 7 we have 1965. And where did you have 1965 ranked?
I had it at number 4, and I had it 7 on toughness of centering. Oh, did you put it at 8? Oh yeah, one more down. Yeah, you're at 8.
Yep, number 8. Mint percentage 49%. Gem mint percentage only 0.64%. As far as the mantles go, you can see there. As far as the mantles go, PSA 8 569, PSA 9 is only 70, PSA 10 0. So very, very hard to find a mint copy of a Mantle card in 1965.
Dude, the Mantle card is notorious in that Mantle and Clemente in 65. I mean, the Clemente is even tougher. If you had that data, it would just probably baffle your mind. But the Mickey Mantle, it is extremely hard to find as well.
Wow, I wonder if that was like on a corner or something like that, or
I'm sure it was. Yeah.
Wow. Okay, let's move on to number 6. At number 6, we have 1964. 43% on the mint percentage, 0.47 on the gem mint percentage. Dylan said that out of all these sets, he felt this was the easiest to find centered. And then Mantle, 677 on the PSA 8, PSA 9, 62. And there's only been one PSA 10 Mantle ever graded. So what do you think about, what did you have? Where did you put 64 out on your ranking?
Number 8.
Number 8, okay.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's an easier set to find centered. I have it, I don't have that many of them. It's not my favorite set of all time. I like it, but it's easy to see centering. Maybe that's kind of how my centering scale works. Like, it's easy to see centering, and I can find them if you're patient. Not crazy hard.
Okay, number 5. What did you have at number 5?
Number 5, because I forgot about 1960 itself. I put that number 5.
Okay. 1966. Where did you have 1966 as far as
numbers? I had that number 6.
Okay. So 42% mint percentage. So once again, mint percentage is all the cards that they've graded in 1966, PSA 8s, 9s, and 10s divided by the total cards. Dylan, you said this is the second hardest set you felt to find graded, centered, and PSA 8s 692, PSA 9s 89, PSA 10s. There's only been one ever graded on a Mantle.
Yeah, look at those 9s. I mean, it's getting lower and lower. 66 Mantle is insanely tough to find centered. Every 66 Topps card has some sort of diamond cut to it, or they're like the 79 Topps. They're so hard to get a really perfectly centered copy for whatever reason that year. It's tough.
Wow, it must have been a bad printing or something like that. Like,
there's so many. There's the factors of when they printed it, and when you feed a printer a piece of paper, it can pull it in sideways, pull it in any which way it wants. And if you get a whole bunch of those, you stack them up in your cutter, and they have I'm sure they did the same process of when I worked on the mainland, there was a cutter next door. So I saw these giant cutters and old school cutters, probably the same ones they were using back then. And they cut them. And if they shift a little, the ones that are going to shift the most are on the edges. The center, the ones in the middle, they barely move. But if you have it shifted during printing and then during cutting, that's where you get all this craziness from.
Yeah.
It's not just one part of the process, it's multiple parts of the process. Still to this day, it's the same thing. They just have more laser, they have dots on them, and it matches it up and tries to shuffle them into the right spot before it cuts it, but you still have the same issues.
Yeah. So this seems to maybe fall under that condition sensitive grouping that we were talking about, even though it has a white border.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, so number 4 is 1961. 39% mint percentage, gem mint percentage 0.25. And Dylan said this is the hardest set he feels to find centered. And then as far as the mantle goes, because for whatever reason on my screen it's showing that it's too big. PSA 8, 769, PSA 9, 109, and there's been 2 PSA 10s graded. So what's your thoughts on that being? Where did you have 1961 as far as your guess goes?
I had it number 3.
Okay.
And I felt like I was torn between 66 and 61 being the hardest one to find centered. And looking at the numbers, if those were centering numbers, it looks like the 66 was harder to find than the 61, at least in the Mantle copy. But yeah, 61 is just extremely hard to find centered. They all look all weird and for whatever reason, but they're out there. I have a decent amount of 61s that are really well centered.
Cool. Okay, let's move on to the top 3. So at number 3, 1963, mint percentage only 37%, gem mint percentage 0.1. Dylan said as far as centering goes, it's number 4, so close to the middle as far as that goes. And then Mantle, PSA 8, 444, PSA 9, 43, and only 2 PSA 10s exist. So one of my favorite sets. 1963, where was your guess at on that one?
I had that at number 2.
Oh, okay. Wow.
Simply because of the color border on the bottom. It's going to be tough. And the centering on those, they're not, everyone says they're super extremely hard. They're not crazy. To me, they're not extremely hard.
Okay.
Number 4, though.
Yeah. Okay. Number 2, we have 1960. The only horizontal card on the 1960s list. Mint percentage 29%, gem mint 0.09. Dylan had that right in the middle as far as centering goes. The Mantle 480 on the PSA 8, PSA 9 46, and there's never been a PSA 10 graded. Pretty ridiculous. But what's your thoughts on the 1960s card, Dylan?
Well, my first thoughts are I wish I would have remembered. Like, I wasn't thinking about 1960 because it's 6-0, and I wish I would have spent more time looking at it. But I have a lot of 1960 cards that look incredible, and they're incredibly well centered, and I stand by my ranking centering. So it doesn't match up with how hard it is to find a gem rate, which I didn't think they would correlate either way. Yeah. Because I just didn't think there was going to be a correlation between centering and the gem rate. And this proves it in my mind right here. Yeah. I don't know. I don't think that surprises me that it's number 2. Totally surprises me. Yeah,
it is pretty crazy. All right. And then at number 1, you called it 1962. The mint percentage is only 27%. Gem mint is only 0.05%. As you see there, the Mantle card is brutal. PSA 8 only 203, PSA 9 16, PSA 10 1. So that if you were going after one Mantle card in the 60s as a possible investment card, that might be the one. Not a lot out there. So what do you think, Dylan?
I think it's just obvious. It's just like one of those things, just like 71 tops. Those colored borders, the wood grain, they're chipping. It doesn't surprise me. I knew you kind of just knew that's how it was going to be. I don't agree with the fact that I just hate pop reports in general as far as like bringing that into investment. PSA 9s, like, dude, really? Who cares? I don't know. That's a whole nother topic for another day.
Yeah, I know.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that card we're looking at right there, is that a PSA? Do you know what copy that is that we're looking at?
PSA 8.
That's PSA 8. Okay, yeah. I mean, it's off-centered top to bottom. looks good, but
Yeah.
yeah, it's one of those things. I have a card that looks, I just can't stand the difference between an 8, 9, and a 10. It's just silly to me.
Yeah. No, I agree. So here's the total chart. So as you could see, once again, I talked about in the opening, I actually said 48. I was actually wrong. It's 50. So it looks like the 1968 set was 55% mint percentage, and the 1962 set at the end was 27%. So we're looking at a spread there of like 30% almost, which is pretty crazy to me. But you said you actually thought it would be a higher spread, right?
Yeah, I did for sure. But yeah, I totally thought it would be higher.
And then you can actually see total cards graded by PSA. Everything was pretty comparable. There were some in the 300,000 range, some in the 250-ish range. So it wasn't like any year really got disrespected as far as, maybe not having a lot of rookie cards, so that affected the numbers. I thought we had a pretty big sample size here to actually get, it looks like PSA printed a pretty normal percentage of cards every year. You know what I mean?
That surprises me because I would expect to see big jumps certain years.
Yeah.
Yeah, it looks like the print runs were the same all through the 60s.
Yeah, because like 1960 is the first year, and it's the highest. 345 is the highest number.
And that's probably the most popular set in the 60s. So that kind of makes sense too, right?
Yeah. So maybe it was at the peak of, everybody just being fans of baseball in 1960. I'm not sure, but here's a question for you, Dylan, and this is the last slide. Pop control. We have 10 total, and there could have been a regrade at some point. So we're not even sure if there's less than 10. There's 23 total mantles that are PSA 10 in the 60s. 23. Can you admit that PSA's controlling population counts?
Well, I mean, look, I don't know. I mean, there's the only thing that stands out. If you're blind and you want to have a perfect card in quotes, you can buy a PSA 10. In my mind, as a centering guy, that's like the only one that you could buy blind. The PSA 9s can come diamond cut. Most PSA 10s look really good, so I will give them that. Pop control, I don't actually think they're doing that. I think that's just a conspiracy theory. I don't see why they would need to do that, but I could be completely wrong on that aspect, considering what is it, Nat Turner, he runs it, and he has all the PSA 10s.
Does he really? I didn't know.
I don't know. Well, I think the other guy does, the mega collector, the older guy, but he definitely collects PSA 10s only.
Wow, that's crazy. So out of the 23, 11 were in 68, don't forget. So we're down to, if you count the other 9 years, we're down to what? Of 12 in the other 9 years.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it's frustrating to me because the reason why I chose Mantle was he's going to be most likely the most cards graded per year. Granted, there's some rookie cards like Nolan Ryan. This probably has more cards graded in 68 and things like that. But it's a good sample size. A lot of years he had over 10,000 cards graded, mantles. So you're looking at over 100,000 mantle cards, and we only ended up with 23 10s. So
yeah, that is nuts. Yeah, that's
pretty crazy.
I mean, to get a 10, all the stars have to align. You have to have a card that was never touched from the pack, basically. Perfect cut, perfectly centered, printed perfectly. There are things that make that 10 really special, but to me and the way that I collect, you can find those 10s in 3s. All you're going to have is some flaw that you can barely see. And that's where I think that the collector needs to really take advantage of PSA and say, thank you, grading companies, for making this separation between these cards, because it gives all of us that equal chance. Like, you can get a card that looks just like those PSA 10s in a PSA 3. You really can. And you're going to flip it over on the back, and you might have a miscut on the back, or you might have some wrinkle on the back, something that you're never going to see when you're looking at the card. You put it on the wall. You're never going to see that.
Yeah.
And that card's going to cost you $300 and that 10's going to cost you $2 million. To me, I just say thank you to the grading companies out there, or the grading in general, because it is the great equalizer. I will say it over and over again. I'm trying to take the grading companies down a notch by doing my own grading scale and doing my own slabs, like a lot of us are.
Yep.
But I also love the fact that there is that separation, and none of us play in those PSA 10 fields. That's for the ultra rich and the ultra wealthy who don't even care about looking at the card. They just click buy it now on the PSA 10s or go to those auctions. It's not the normal man's, but we can find cards that look just like those 10s within these grades for a fraction of the price. That's the goal of my collection. And that, I think that gives us a lot of hope. It gives me a lot of hope as a collector that I could have a card that looks just like that $1 million card for nothing.
I'm curious your opinion on after seeing this data, could a dealer or maybe even somebody like you that sells on the side, could they look at the data and go, I'm going to go to a card show and I'm going to go to common boxes, and now I know 68 is very easy to get 8s, 9s, or 10s. So I know like that's easy. But if I find a 62 common that looks really good, still like it's got to look almost perfect. Like, does that give somebody like an idea? Because if they want to take advantage of the PSA system and resell some common cards on 8s, 9s, and 10s to the ultra rich people, does that make sense? Or
I mean, it makes sense to a point, but I genuinely think this is kind of, I don't want to say common sense, but anyone who's collecting decent amount of time, the market tells you what the hardest is. Like, I could have done this blindfolded based off just pricing on eBay, right? Yeah. And since we all are on eBay all the time, and I've been buying cards forever, you learn which ones are hard, learn which ones are expensive, and what are expensive are the hard ones that gem out. And I think I'm sure people do that, and they'll go find, but in all sense of the word, the market's going to tell you what it's worth regardless. And I think that dealers are picking through their 62s in their boxes, and they're picking out the ones that are really good. And the ones that are in there might have been trimmed. They might not have. I mean, that opens a whole nother can of worms. But yeah. I've seen a lot of guys buy a lot of ungraded stuff, and then they things from like 62s and stuff, and they come back authentic. And on the big stuff, I'm still buying pre-slabbed cards. If I'm spending $150 or even $100 or more, I'm still going to buy these things slabbed up by a company, so it's kind of there. Whereas the stuff under 100, man, all day long, look in those boxes. And yeah, you can take advantage. I've seen guys like you pull cards out and then get them graded, and they become worth a lot more.
Yeah. So
there's definitely still, you still got to have an eye, but it's not rocket science.
Yeah. Well, this was a fun exercise. I'm curious how people like it, if people thought it was interesting. I've never seen this really done necessarily as far as the videos I've watched. So curious to hear if people liked it. If they did, maybe we could do 70s or 50s, do a different decade. So I hope people enjoyed the exercise. Like I said, I got a lot out of it. I thank you, Dylan, for your time today, man. I really appreciate it.
Heck yeah. You come up with great ideas. I think the 70s would be really cool because there's a lot of colored borders on there. So it'd be a really interesting one to see, although it's probably another common sense one as well. But it is really fun to look at these numbers. And I think the way you go about things. Oh, we lost you. I lost you. I enjoy this type of stuff. I know a lot of guys could care less. Yeah. But I love this stuff. So keep doing this stuff.
Cool, man. And everybody, if you haven't, I don't know how you'd be under a rock, but if you haven't checked out Dylan's channel, check it out. Dylan, I just got your package of the mail yesterday. Dylan had a whatnot sale. I got my cards. I got some nice cards here. Thank you, Dylan. I didn't have the Dave Parker card. I really appreciate it, man.
You got it, man. I thank you so much.
All right. Well, thanks everybody for watching. If you like the video, give us a like, give us a comment, and subscribe to the channel. We'll see you on the next one, guys.